want to welcome Mark Stouse to my expert interview series. Mark Stouse is the chairman and CEO of ProofAnalytics, a company that helps businesses understand the impact of their marketing and sales efforts and enables them to plan, predict, prove, and pivot their investments in real time. He is also a partner at Vaulting Ventures, which invests in startups that are disrupting traditional HR, marketing, and R&D functions. Mark writes monthly editorials for MarTech and Forbes, and he is a former executive at Honeywell, BMC Software, and HP. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for taking the time.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you so much, man.
I'm very excited, and I have a number of questions. If you're ready, we can jump right in.
Yeah, take your best shot. I'll do my best to answer.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to hear just a little bit about you. Can you tell me your origin story and what got you so interested in data and analytics?
Yeah, it was probably like for a lot of us, 20, 25 years ago, it was all about ego, right? I was at HP working for Mark Hurd. He challenged the value of marketing extensively. And then he gave me what ended up being kind of like one of the best gifts that anybody ever gave me in my profession. He said, and I have a new mentor for you. He's only going to be your mentor for like 4 months, so don't get too used to it. But he's like, he told me who it was, and it was the CFO of the company.
Wow.
And Bob Wayman sat there, took it very seriously, sat there for like 3 hours a week and essentially cracked my skull and gave me an executive MBA in 4 months. And it was all focused on, this is what I care about. You don't need to know this, and this. And anybody who says that you do is crazy, okay? But you really need to understand this, and this, because this is what you're mapping to.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I care about, right? And so between the data science piece, the business acumen piece, and all that kind of stuff, right? We did kind of an initial proof of concept, which was so successful that it kind of tripped all my ego triggers, right? And I became sort of addicted immediately, good serotonin levels, all that kind of stuff, right? And then I started really using it. And then I started realizing over time, very slowly, that the value of this was in illuminating my ignorance, not proving how smart I was. And actually, a person has to be willing on this. But if you are willing to allow things like analytics, and for that matter, being an entrepreneur, to make you a better person, they absolutely will make you a better person.
I love that angle. And to dig in there about what you learned specifically, how can we know with clarity, for instance, if our marketing investments are performing?
So the math on it actually is not even remotely new. It's been a cornerstone of the scientific method of inquiry for a long time. In its most basic form, we're talking about multivariable regression, anything that creates a causal readout. I'm trying to make this demystify it a little bit in my language.
Yes. Right? Appreciate that.
Well, the technical term is causal inference, but everyone kind of goes, what? We want to understand to what degree, if at all, everything that we're spending money on and controlling in go-to-market has an effect on more deals, bigger deals, faster deals, or something else, right? Net of time lag, which is the amount of time it takes for something to begin to have an effect, because nothing happens instantaneously. And net of the headwinds and tailwinds in the marketplace that we don't control. Mm-hmm. Which are either helping us or hurting us. And oh, by the way, that last part is generally a maximum in data science, is that for you to have a reasonably accurate model, which is just a representation of reality as close as we can get. Around 70% of the factors have to be stuff you don't control, because that's life. That's what causal analytics does. And it does it not just for go-to-market or for business in general or some other aspect of business. It does it for climate change. It does it for epidemiology. One of the reasons why it is a cornerstone of the scientific method is that it's so flexible. Because at the end of the day, it's agnostic to use case or to industry or anything like that. This is all about determining those key questions. What do I control? What do I not control? What am I trying to achieve and all that? How long does it take? And what levers, to the extent that I have control over levers, right? How should I be moving those levers around to get closer to the mark? So the analogy I use all the time here is Major League Baseball, batting averages. If you have a career 350, not only have you made a lot of money, but you are going to the Hall of Fame. And yet that also means you have struck out 2/3 of the time, which in academic circles, because you have almost total control over academic performance, that would be considered an F, a big F, huge F, right? And yet a 35 in baseball batting averages is considered heroic.
Yeah. And in close percentages, it's not all that bad either.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And what I'd like to do next is just describe to you, just from a practical standpoint, maybe we can apply this here. I'd like to just describe to you a traditional approach to making marketing investments from a marketer, and maybe have you tell me what's missing with it.
Yeah, sure.
So the goal is to determine, obviously, the best channels and messages that'll resonate with our best buyer. And so the way a marketer like me would go about it, as you know, is we would interview our best customers, what we feel are our ideal best customers, based on data and uncontract information, and ideal prospects to determine their core challenges, who influences them, and their sources of information. Where do they go to find products or services like ours? And then we would analyze our competitors to see where they might be investing, what messages they're using. So we would analyze their marketing and approach, thinking maybe we can learn something from them. And then, we would take those two and kind of figure out what we thought is going to be the best approach for us between what customers and prospects said, what competitors revealed. And then we would go out and we would test to confirm those channels and messages, and then determine what are those channels we think are working based on those tests. Is that a valid approach? Is there anything I'm missing in that approach?
I would say that it's valid, but there is a lot that you are missing. So the amount of bias in that whole approach is severe. Just by who you're choosing to talk to, how they feel, their state of maturity, right? It represents a radical over-optimization. It's not that you shouldn't talk to them and grab all that perspective and that data, but you need to balance it out with equal interest in people who don't care, people who have different views, don't expect it to work, because they are essentially saying, I'm not in your ICP right now, but we all know that they might be at some point, right? And if you're not marketing to them where they are in the mindset that they have, right, you're not relevant. It's perhaps unfair, but that doesn't mean it's not true.
Is it because you're predicting that what is today is going to be tomorrow, and that's not accurate?
Very, very fundamentally not accurate.
Yeah.
Past not prologue, extrapolation is not reality. All you have to do to prove that out is to look at, say, revenue projections in SaaS 2020, 2021, 22, 23, 24, right? The last 3 years where just everybody was a train wreck, right? No one, or hardly anybody, right, reached their targets. They were usually way off. And almost without exception, they were extrapolating from a different reality, a different marketplace reality, and thinking that somehow that marketplace reality, those changes wouldn't matter.
We have to factor in trend data. You said also those that are not currently your prospects, but could be in the future.
Yeah, I mean, so one way of kind of summing all this up is the issue of market timing, which unfortunately none of us can predict and none of us can control. It's like it's in investment terms, it's catching the falling knife, right? We experienced this with Proof, right? For the first, say, 4 years, and we certainly had enough customers to stay alive and all that kind of stuff, but most people weren't interested. And we were like sitting there going, how in the world can you not be interested? And the thing that we were totally missing was that in the world at that time, money was so cheap and easy to get. There wasn't any pressure.
Waste is okay in that environment.
Waste is okay. And you could even totally screw up and people would give you more money.
Yeah.
Right? Today, that is definitely not the case.
Mm-hmm.
And when interest rates went up, say 2.5 years ago, what really started becoming clear, right, was that the opportunity cost on the existing cash left in their bank accounts went insane. So we're all, as business people, we're placing bets. For 20 years, we got used to just placing tons of bets, and the ones that worked, but we couldn't prove that they worked. But if everything kind of generally went well, then it was all goodness, right? Mm-hmm. Well, now you can't do that, because if you spend 20 grand out of 100 on something highly speculative and it doesn't work, man, that's a fundamentally damaging investment. I think the other thing that's really happening here on this that's going to be really powerful is that AI in general, let's call it combined AI, is bringing a level of transparency and accountability to all of us in ways that we are fundamentally not ready for.
Can you explain that? I was going to ask you about that specifically. Tell me how it's able to give us feedback that we need in order to, to correct some of this, to do this well.
Well, there was a situation earlier this week where in an all hands call, a CEO suddenly figured out that everything he said in that call was being evaluated by ChatGPT on the devices of people in the call, in the meeting, right? And that he wasn't exactly showing up well. Like essentially ChatGPT was saying a lot of this has challenges with its veracity. That kind of ultra short cycle feedback loop is tough. And at that point, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO. You can't just say, I'm the CEO, and so my opinion goes, right? If it's very plainly being shown to not be the case, you've actually taken a huge step backwards with your employees.
It challenges accuracy and our assumptions in real time.
Yeah.
And that can impact, our actions, our future actions, and maybe even somebody's career, I guess.
No, I mean, like another one is this has been happening now for probably over a year. Companies release their quarterly results and their annual guidance, right? And that is immediately put through very sophisticated AI to find the gaps. So, what it really shows us is that we've all been bobbing and weaving our whole lives in a gray zone, right? And our ability to effectively bullshit our way through things, right, has proven to be an important survival skill. That the applicability of that and the size of the gray zone in which it happens is going to shrink big time in the next 2 years. This is imminent, right? I had a conversation yesterday with a CEO. We were talking about this, and he's like, well, this is a forcing function. What do you think the timing is? And I said, 2, maybe 3 years tops. And I said, and that means in a company the size of yours, you need to start on Monday.
Yeah, it's imminent.
The combination of wanting to be accountable and to do good work and to have better insights has really impacted the way that I use AI, right? So I will have kind of like an investigative conversation, very Socratic, on something that I may want to write about. And it will help me kind of organize my thinking. And then I will write whatever I want to write. And my pieces are not written by AI. I write them. And then I upload it though into Chat GPT, and I say, please review this rigorously for factual accuracy. And it will do that.
If you don't mind, I'd love to switch gears on you and kind of discuss some fallacies, maybe misconceptions.
Yeah.
So we've all been told we need to make, decisions based on data. But what are the things that it can't do for you?
Data is a proto asset. Data is like crude oil. The reason why crude oil has a value is not because it intrinsically has utility, right? It's because everybody knows all the cool stuff with lots of utility that you can refine from the crude oil, right? Kerosene, gasoline, benzene, all that stuff, plastics, whatever. That's what gives the oil its value. Same thing is true for data, right? This is one of the fallacies of data visualization. Data is always and only about the past. To put it really bluntly, the only way that you have data on something is if it's already happened. That's the basis of measurement. You can't measure something that hasn't happened yet.
And it's why we can't predict the stock market, because there's a level of, emotion, people. There's so many other factors.
Yes.
The economy. Then if they could put predictive models on it, and they would already have figured it out.
So here's the thing. And but you have to realize that there is still a gap between having it figured out and being probabilistically accurate. So there's a lot of really good programmatic trades that are made in the stock market. Okay, but that doesn't mean it's perfect every time for exactly the reasons that you're talking about. So if you look at data alone in silo, right, you'll begin, the natural human tendency is to see things that aren't there in terms of connections and to extrapolate. And an extrapolation is an assumption writ large. And if your dad was like my dad, one of the things he always said was, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me, right? And so what has to happen is the refinery for data is analytics. It's what associates all of the data, which are piece parts of a network, and reassembles them all as a network, as a modeled network, right? So that to the best of our ability, we can see what's going on, what has happened historically, what has been important historically in terms of causes and effects, turn that into a causal forecast that then we can compare on a rolling basis with actuals, right? At that point, you start getting into some very, very interesting territory where, particularly if you are including things you don't control as headwinds and tailwinds, the whole thing becomes adjusting. It's self-adjusting. It's self-acknowledging, right? Particularly in its more modern existence, which would be causal AI.
Mm.
And so, again, it's not about perfection. A great example of this in real life that we're all familiar with is GPS. GPS gets us from point A to point B reliably. It helps us ascertain all the things that we can't see that would either speed us up or slow us down on that journey. If things get too bad, it'll reroute us, right? But it's only accurately locating us at any time on the map to within about 50 feet. Okay, so what does that tell you? It tells you that you have good enough for that use case accuracy, sufficient accuracy, right? You don't have perfect accuracy. You could, okay, it could easily locate you within a 12-inch circle, right? But then it wouldn't be free.
And I was also wondering, are there presenting symptoms that companies come with or executives come with to ProofAnalytics, your business, versus what you find are their true challenges of many of these companies? I'm interested in that perception versus reality.
Most of them are not thinking about externalities at all. Like when they come, they invariably, get a new customer, they start building models, they're having fun building models, and they're seeing stuff that they like or maybe that they don't like, right? And then, kind of like a dog with a bone, I'm not trying to be pejorative, right? They always call us up and want to show it to us, right? And you're kind of like, well, that's cool, but you're only modeling the things you control. What about the rest of everything? You're surfing a wave. All these other things, that's the wave. You can try to understand it, but you will never control it. And the success that you have, what separates, a beautiful finish with a flourish on the beach versus a wipeout, okay, is how you reacted to changes in the wave. That's a really big one. I would say that for a lot of marketers and a lot of business people, they don't really understand how it works. And the it in that sentence is literally what they do. So like when I talk to B2B marketers and salespeople, and I say, do you understand that sales is a linear value creator? And that marketing is a nonlinear multiplier of sales performance, right? And do you understand the importance of that statement? I get a no. And yet there's nothing that can, in B2B anyway, that could be more central to the equation than those statements.
Yeah.
Right. If I decide that for 2025, I want to double my CRO's target, the very next conversation I'm going to have, right, is, well, we got to figure out a way to fairly rapidly double the size of the sales team. Because it's a pro rata distribution. It's a bell curve distribution, right? And the way that sales is typically run is that one person can only handle so much quota, right? So then it becomes basic multiplication, right? I got this target, I got this number of people. That means each of their quotas is this, right? Oops, that's too high, right? I need more people. So the linearity in this particular case really speaks to the fact that the cost of the sales team tracks almost one for one the revenue. The problem is, of course, is that a lot of it is sunk cost in the form of base salaries for salespeople, many of whom never sell a thing before they're finally let go, right? So this represents a really significant risk. It also represents a significant risk to marketing, because marketing is the nonlinear multiplier of sales performance, sales effectiveness, and efficiency, right? It exists, marketing exists, but marketing is leverage. It's there to make sales more productive and more efficient, okay, than sales could ever be by itself. Well, what is that really? Like, what are the statistics? What do the analytics say about that? Well, if we take kind of like a typical mid-market company with scaled go-to-market apparatus, right? Marketing is making sales about 8 times more efficient and about 5 times more effective than sales would be or could be by itself. Where you occasionally, other than in the analytics, where you really see this like in real life would be a situation like there were a couple of companies during COVID that very ostentatiously said, we've killed our marketing and we didn't see any change, right? Yeah. And I was looking at that and I'm like, well, you just wait, right? Because marketing is a time lagged thing, right? So it takes a while to begin to have an effect. And then even if you cut it off, everything that you've done marketing wise to that point continues to have an effect for a period of time, right? And that hangover is usually about 18, 20 months ish, right? So sure enough, just like God made little green apples, right? They came out from underneath that overhang. And all of a sudden their revenue plunged by almost exactly those kinds of numbers. Mm-hmm. And because they no longer had the advantage of the marketing multiplier. And so this goes straight into conversations about ROI, which actually is the wrong word to use entirely. Now, everybody kind of uses it colloquially in conversation to denote what did we get back from on the money that we spent, right? But ROI as a calculation is a historical efficiency metric, and you're not clipping coupons from a bond, okay, in business. So it really isn't material. What they're really asking is, okay, we spent the money on Jan 1. How long did it take until we started to see the beginning of payback? And what kind of multiple did we get on that? Mm-hmm. Right? If we spent $1, did we get 3 back? Did we get 15 back? What's that ratio? And it doesn't mean that it's deterministic. Quite the contrary. It's highly probabilistic. You can calculate the probabilities. And so you can kind of take the squishiness out a lot. Okay. But it's never going to be like a law of gravity.
Mm-hmm. I love that perspective because my approach to marketing for all these years, I was a founder first. And so I view marketing from a founder perspective. So I don't mess around with vanity metrics and things of that nature. And when you're talking about building awareness, affinity, and trust so that you can deliver to your sales team something that is qualified and highly motivated, in order to reduce the sales cycle and increase the average sale. I mean, that's what we're trying to deliver, and everything we put in their hands, we want to be quality so that they can turn that around, and that would increase close rates and things like that. Again, speaking to that efficiency you're mentioning, and when that's done well, you've got a really efficient sales engine, and then from which to grow from, and your investments tend to be pretty good in terms of the ROI as you're describing. So
No, that's right. I mean, I'll tell you what's really crazy about this is that, like a classic scenario is the CRO is in competition with the CMO, right? And he or she is always trying to take money out of marketing and put it into more sales stuff, right? That's one of the dumbest ideas that anybody could ever come up with, because they are taking money out of a highly leveraged, positively leveraged situation and depositing it into a straight line, zero leverage situation. And you think that's good business?
But this is why we need to build trust with our CFOs, because we need them to start to give us a shot at doing this well and doing this right. And if we're not doing it well and doing it right, then we need to be held accountable for sure.
The problem is that the business acumen in go-to-market teams is so bad, is so inadequate for the most part, right? That finance is kind of like an exemplar of the business mindset, right? Has a really, really hard time giving us in go-to-market credibility. When you can't manage your budget accurately, right? And you are routinely way over and unexpectedly way over at the end of the quarter,
that's got to drive them crazy.
It would drive anyone crazy, right? It would drive anyone crazy. And they're kind of like, what, you can't seriously just maintain a checkbook register, and as soon as you spend it, you subtract it from the total, and man, did it ever destroy trust. Just destroyed it. When there's no knowledge and no trust and no confidence, you have a 100% friction relationship.
And it's a sad state of affairs, and we all can do better. Where do you see things going for B2B companies in 2025? Do you see the market heading in a certain direction? You were talking about, the efficient growth perspective. You're talking about some, using AI. Where's your business taking companies, and where are they going? B2B companies in particular.
Well, in all the conversations that I've had with CFOs and CEOs, risk in all caps is their number one thing, right? And it's not just about mitigating downside risk of bad decisions. It's also mitigating the risk of not being in a good place to take advantage of something cool when it comes along. And when we kind of think about that as a swing, a total swing on risk, right? From way down here to way up here, and you got to manage the two, right? That is really, really tough. It's very tough, right? And then it gets tougher because 2025 and 26 are likely to be some of the most volatile years that we've had in a while. And that's saying something, as all of us know, right?
And disruptive from a technology standpoint. We have no idea what's coming.
That's right. One of the first tailwinds that we really hit that really helped us a lot, tragically, was COVID. COVID completely destroyed the idea that past was prologue.
Makes sense.
And essentially did a 52 card pickup on marketing channels, right?
Yep.
And so all of a sudden people were like, wow, I got to have some sort of way of figuring this out that makes sense and looks around the corner and down the road and all that kind of stuff, right? And this is the only way to do that. I mean, and yes, I sell it. And so I am, I guess, in one sense, biased. Okay. But it doesn't mean it's not true, too. It is true, right? It's the only way to do it. There's that piece to it. The volatility and the risk issue is huge. The saturation that we're seeing in the workforce is without precedent, really. The workforce for the last, say, 10 years or so has been constantly bombarded with new tech, new requirements, new this, new that, right? And it's like ground that's been rained on so much that it's totally saturated and it can't absorb any more rain. And so any new rain just sheets off. And that's what we're seeing in SaaS. The whole principle of SaaS is we'll sell you the license to the tool, but you have to run it. We can help you get it all set up and, everything, but you're the operator in the end, right? Well, teams are smaller than they used to be. They have less money than they used to have. They're overstretched. They're psychologically shot. So SaaS is seeing more and more churn because finance is looking at tools and they're saying, man, this tool is not getting used at all, or we're not getting the value out of this tool. So we're going to just kill it, right? We got caught up in Proof. We got caught up in that because we sell it as SaaS, right? And there were a lot of people who would say, man, I so want this. I so need this, right? But I can't even come close to running it. Mm-hmm. And the deals that we had, like 94% of them in the last 2 years had services attached. And when you look at what the services were, it was essentially outsourced operation. It was managed services. And so we started selling it as a software enabled service with packaged solutions that you could buy very inexpensively. And it was just like very boundaried and here it is. And if you want more, you can always get more, kind of thing. That was a big model change, but it was all about the customer. I think that that's very emblematic of what's going to happen in the next 2 years. People are going to have, if they want to be in business, they're going to have to go with what the customer really wants.
Yeah. Now, I hear you have a book that's coming out, and I would love if you could just kind of review it for us. Who's it for, and what kind of change do you hope to make with this book? Can you just give us an overview?
All this really bad stuff is happening to go-to-market teams, and clearly the leadership of companies is unhappy with it. And so I want to start a series of interviews with Fortune 2000 CEOs and CFOs about go-to-market and what are their thoughts. And we realized that if we did it on the record, so to speak, right, that we'd get like a 10% candidness, right? Because no CEO wants to have to deal with all the internal flack, right? So we said, look, we'll offer you a deal. Here's a contract, totally protecting your identity. In exchange, you will give us total candor. And boy, we got it. Right. And does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that they are mostly right. They have huge holes in the accuracy of what they believe to be true. But they're also got some really strong points, right? And so this started out as a, you know what, I'm going to publish this book and it's going to be all about this so that go-to-market leaders and teams can see a cohesive portrait of why they feel the way they feel today. Other things started coming into the mix, risk and AI and things that colored their understanding of go-to-market. That is really what the book is all about. And we talk about like data readiness is getting ready to be something about which there can be no negotiation anymore, no flexibility at all. It will be seen as a total marker of your competence in your profession.
And you mean accuracy in particular, right?
Accuracy, availability, quality, preparedness. I mean, like an area that's going to just absolutely get a big stick thrown at it, okay, is sales data in CRM. It's got gaps in it. It's got inaccuracies in it. It's got all kinds of issues that are kind of normal type data issues. And then on top of that, it's heavily engineered. A lot of the data in the CRM is untrue. In fact, the exact same software, the AI that financial services firms use to detect fraud in credit card accounts can be used with almost no modification at all on CRM. And so what's going to end up happening, I can say this pretty authoritatively because it's what has to happen if you're caught essentially committing fraud with your data. They're going to fire you. So I'm going to give you one more example that'll blow your mind. Okay. It'll blow the mind of every single person that hears it because it absolutely blows mine. And I'm not, as an investor, I'm right there in it. Okay. So there are quite a few companies that are building AI buyer bots. The buyer bot then will go out and troll the entire internet, shortlist vendors, run an analysis of their respective awareness levels in the marketplace, their confidence and trust levels, the accuracy of everything they've ever put out on the web about what they do. And you'll get a score. And if you're below a certain score, you will not get called and you will never know, except somehow hearing through a grapevine somewhere, you will never know that there was ever a potential deal. There will be no signals for anyone to supply you with. There might have been a deal. Mm-hmm. If you make the list, they'll call you in at the 11th hour for probably 1 or 2 meetings with real people who will then say, okay, this is great. We'd like to work with you. This is what we're willing to pay. Do you want the job or not?
That's outstanding. That's so interesting from a marketer's perspective, right? We're thinking about how on the front end today, when we sell to humans, we have to persuade and emotional appeal and all of that sort of thing. But when you're selling to robots, that's not what you're providing, right? You're providing a level of accuracy and problem solving and things like that. And then you're trying to deliver on the back end the best possible service that people rave about, so that, again, on the front end, those bots can find the fact that you can perform and you have high ratings and this is something trustworthy. So it's almost like it kind of flips the script on, how marketing is going to begin to market in a new age. So I find it fascinating and I'm ready for it, to be honest with you.
Creating a buyer bot where the human decision maker is so far removed from the earlier part of the process, you're essentially, you've removed the incentive to even market to the human being, except in the most always on and generally relevant ways. So personalization, orchestration, all this kind of stuff just goes out the freaking window, right?
Yeah. Well, your analogy to an RFP, right, I think is pretty good, because if we think about how RFPs are approached, and I happen to support RFPs for some of my clients, and these are $1 million deals and things like that, major deals. It's very much based on, what are the facts? Here's the things we're looking for. Tell us who you are and what you do, um, and then we'll consider then having a conversation with you, and then we'll go into that piece of the sales process. But we need to just validate on the front end that we're and filter on the front end that we're talking to the right people. I mean, HR does that all the time with candidates. So it's not too terrible of a way to find solutions, to be honest with you, and it takes out a lot of the bias. Um, well, in certain sales, right, for B2B especially, but on the consumer side, there is brand affinity, there is status that's given with that, with purchases there and things like that. So, we'll see where that goes. But on our side of the world, in the B2B side, this makes a ton of sense, I think.
The last thing that I'll say about 2025 and beyond is the rise of the fiduciary, the specialized fiduciary. So like go-to-market fiduciary certification, right? People want to know that that their team is going to act in the best interests of the company and the marketplace, not their own. They really want to know that for agencies, contractors, fractionals, people like that, right? And so having a cert that I am a full-blown certified go-to-market fiduciary, I think will become ever more important. And so part of it is helping all of them understand the broader network that is go-to-market, how they all work together, how they optimize together, how they are really in the same boat, and the extent to which they all fight over resources while being in the same boat is really stupid.
It's interesting because my point of view for many years, I mean, I started as the founder, has been that we need to market like owners. It's about marketing like an owner, is that you come to the job every day ready to steward and shepherd your, what's given to you in the best possible ways to have an impact on the business, and work together with your team as one unit to provide, the best possible product and service that you can, and to improve the buyer journey, and to, have loyal customers that stick around and tell other people about you. And, that's what you want when you own a business. And that's, the perspective that you have to have when you run a department within a business. So I like, the approach that you're taking on the fiduciary side of getting everybody on the same page with the same commitment, working together. So
it's also, it really dovetails with the rest of it. A lot of the stuff we've already talked about, right? Whether it's AI, the ability to know, right? Transparency and accountability, that dovetails into it. The desire to de-risk a lot of things.
Yeah.
Right. the fact also that we were talking about nonlinear functions, right? Marketing is not the only one. In fact, if you make up a list of nonlinear functions in the average corporation, every single one of them is under challenge. And that's because you can't just look at it and see that they're beneficial, right? But when you throw an analytical lens on it, that's when all of a sudden it becomes pretty obvious what's going on.
Service departments are under major threat.
Customer success.
Yeah, customer success, and your level of service you provide to customers, which seems essential. It's going to become much more automated. There's nothing wrong with that as long as we're, doing it in the right ways, obviously.
As long as our customers think that it's effective,
yeah,
then
and it's helpful.
No one cares, right? It's because it's all automated, like at my bank, right? It takes me a lot longer to complete a call than it otherwise should. So all they've done really is shift their time and expense to me, right? Now, I don't have a lot of alternatives because they all do it. But sooner or later, that's going to change, because it always does. That part of it is immutable.
Right. Well, Mark, thank you so much for today. I appreciate this conversation. It's been fascinating as always. It's great to talk to you. And, I just want to, again, thank you for taking the time to answer my questions today.
Thank you, Aaron. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it too. And if people want to engage further, they should just find me on LinkedIn. I'm not hard to find.
Appreciate you, Mark.
Thank you.